My grandfather Elias built a logistics empire from the ground up, fighting through decades of adversity to create generational wealth for our family. But the day his will was read, my parents and my sister treated his legacy like a clearance sale. When the estate lawyer revealed that I, the quiet, independent daughter they always cast aside, was the sole heir to his $18 million estate, the room erupted. My family demanded I hand over every dime immediately. I refused. Less than 24 hours later, they orchestrated a ruthless ambush. My sister and her husband showed up at my grandparents' lake house with a forged eviction notice ready to throw me out onto the street. But they froze dead in their tracks when they realized exactly who was standing right behind me. Before I tell you how I systematically dismantled my family house of cards, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to protect your peace and your rightful legacy from the toxic people who share your blood. I am Kendra, 35 years old, and a forensic accountant who has spent her entire professional career observing the numbers, the discrepancies, and the lies people try to hide. Growing up in my family, that skill was not just a career choice, it was a survival mechanism. I was standing in the grand marble foyer of my late grandparents' $4 million estate in Lake Geneva. The morning air was perfectly still, smelling faintly of old pine and the deep fresh water of the lake outside the massive floor-to-ceiling windows. I was holding a mug of black coffee, simply trying to breathe through the heavy, suffocating grief of losing Elias and Ruby. They were the only people who ever saw my worth without attaching a condition to it. But in my family, grief has a notoriously short shelf life when there is money on the table. The silence of the house was violently shattered. The heavy double oak front doors did not just open, they were shoved inward with such aggressive force that they slammed against the interior walls, causing the framed photographs of my grandparents hanging in the entryway to shudder against the plaster. In marched my younger sister Jada, accompanied by her husband Trent. Trent was a senior vice president of finance at a mid-sized investment firm. He was a white man who wore his unearned entitlement like a tailored suit, always assuming he was the smartest and most important person in any room he walked into. Today was no different. He did not even bother to wipe his expensive loafers on the welcome mat. He simply strode right up to where my leather overnight bag was resting near the console table, drew back his foot, and kicked it straight out the open doorway. My bag tumbled down the stone porch steps and spilled its contents onto the gravel driveway. I did not flinch. I did not scream. I just took a slow, deliberate sip of my coffee and looked at them. Jada strutted in right behind him, casually flipping her freshly silk-pressed hair over her shoulder as if she owned the place. She was wearing a designer trench coat that I knew for an absolute fact she could not afford on her maxed-out credit cards. "Your squatting days are over, Kendra," she announced, her voice echoing shrilly in the cavernous foyer. "You have exactly 10 minutes to gather the rest of your trash and vacate the premises." Trent pulled a folded piece of paper from his jacket pocket and slapped it onto the mahogany console table with an arrogant smirk. "It is a formal notice of eviction," he stated, crossing his arms over his chest to physically block my path. "Signed and authorized. You are trespassing on estate property, and as the designated financial manager for the family trust, I am officially removing you from the premises." I looked down at the paper. It was printed on some generic legal letterhead he must have found online, filled with aggressive but meaningless legal jargon. It was a complete forgery, an intimidation tactic designed to make me panic and submit. I looked back up at Jada, who was currently eyeing a vintage crystal vase on the side table, as if deciding where she would move it once I was gone. She was already mentally redecorating my house. "Are you planning to fund the upkeep of this property the same way you fund your life?" I asked, keeping my voice dangerously level. "The same way I funded your destination wedding in Cabo." Jada's smug expression faltered for a fraction of a second. "You remember Cabo, right, Jada? When you maxed out 3 different credit cards for your extravagant floral arrangements and cried on my apartment floor until I drained my emergency savings to pay off your vendors just so you would not be humiliated in front of Trent's wealthy family. Jada's face flushed a deep, angry red. That was a loan she snapped defensively, her voice losing its previous bravado. And this house belongs to the family. Not to you. It belongs to me, I corrected her calmly, setting my coffee mug down next to their fake eviction notice. By direct order of grandfather Elias, Trent let out a loud, condescending laugh, stepping closer to me in an obvious attempt at physical intimidation. He was a tall man accustomed to using his physical presence to make women back down in corporate boardrooms. But I was not one of his junior analysts, and I refused to yield a single inch of ground. Listen to me very carefully, Kendra, Trent said, his tone dripping with authority he did not possess. You are a glorified bookkeeper who crunches numbers for small businesses. You have absolutely no idea how to manage an $18 million portfolio or a luxury property of this magnitude. Jada and I are stepping in to protect the legacy before you ruin it. We are not asking you to leave. We are telling you. I smiled at him. It was a tight, cold smile that held absolutely no warmth. A forensic accountant is not a glorified bookkeeper, Trent. I audit corporate fraud for a living. And if you think a piece of paper you printed off the internet gives you the right to kick me out of my own home, you are even more foolish than my grandfather always said you were. I stepped past him, completely ignoring his aggressive posturing, and walked toward the open doorway to retrieve my scattered belongings. But as I reached the edge of the porch, the heavy crunching sound of tires on gravel stopped me in my tracks. A sleek, leased Mercedes G-Wagon pulled up the long, winding driveway, coming to a halt, right next to my discarded overnight bag. The engine cut off, and the heavy doors swung open. Out stepped my parents, Vivian and Desmond. My mother adjusted her signature pearl necklace, her eyes scanning the massive lakefront property with a ravenous hunger that made my stomach turn. My father adjusted his suit jacket, his jaw set in a hard, unforgiving line. They did not look like parents coming to check on their grieving daughter after a devastating family loss. They looked like an executive board arriving for a hostile takeover. As they marched up the porch steps, deliberately stepping right over my scattered clothes, without a second glance, the reality of the situation locked into place. This was not just a temper tantrum thrown by Jada and her arrogant husband. This was a highly coordinated ambush. The real war had just arrived at my doorstep, and they were fully prepared to destroy me, to get exactly what they wanted. Vivian glides up the stone steps of the porch. The sharp click of her heels sounds like a gavel striking wood, signaling the beginning of a trial where the verdict has already been decided against me. She does not look down at the mess of my belongings scattered across the gravel. She does not ask if I am all right, or why her son-in-law just kicked my property out the door. Instead, her eyes lock onto me with that familiar icy disappointment I have known my entire life. She reaches up her fingers lightly, adjusting the clasp of her pearl necklace, a nervous habit she only displays when she is preparing to dress someone down to the bone. Kendra, she says, her voice a hushed, venomous hiss, meant to keep the affluent neighbors from hearing the commotion. You need to stop this tantrum immediately. You are embarrassing the family legacy. This house represents everything your grandfather built, and you standing out here causing a scene like a common vagrant is entirely beneath us. Pick up your things and let us go inside to discuss this like civilized adults. I look at her, truly amazed at the psychological gymnastics she is performing. Embarrassing the legacy. That is what she calls me, standing my ground while my sister and her husband attempt a hostile takeover of my inheritance. She is more concerned with the optics of a dispute on the front lawn than the fact that I am being openly threatened by a man who married into our family just 5 years ago. Before I can point out the staggering hypocrisy of her statement, my father steps up beside her. Desmond is a man who measures a person's worth strictly by their job title, their social connections, and their tax bracket. He crosses his arms over his chest, his broad shoulders physically blocking the entryway to my own home, and looks down his nose at me with an expression of pure disdain. Listen to your mother, Kendra, he barks. shedding the polite suburban facade he usually wears. We are not doing this today. This property requires a level of financial sophistication and management that you simply do not possess. Trent is a senior vice president of finance. He manages corporate portfolios worth hundreds of millions of dollars on a daily basis. He knows exactly how to handle real estate of this caliber and maximize its value for the family trust. You are just a glorified bookkeeper. You balance ledgers for local businesses. You have absolutely no business trying to hold on to an estate like this. A glorified bookkeeper. The words hang in the crisp morning air, heavy and suffocating. My own father standing on the porch of the house my grandfather legally willed to me, minimizing my entire life's work just to elevate the white man his golden child married. Grandfather Elias started his logistics empire with a single delivery truck. He faced redlining discrimination and relentless obstacles to buy this exact lake property in a predominantly wealthy white neighborhood. He bled for this legacy, and now my parents are willing to hand over the keys to our black family's generational wealth to an outsider simply because that outsider holds a shiny corporate title and knows how to play golf at the right country clubs. I built my independent auditing firm from absolute scratch. I spent years conducting grueling forensic audits that uncovered millions in corporate fraud. I paid my own way through college and graduate school while Vivian and Desmond catered to Jada's every whim. They bought her luxury cars, funded her lavish trips across Europe, and rescued her from every financial disaster she created. They starved me of support to feed her boundless entitlement. And now they are trying to starve me of my rightful legacy to feed Trent's greed. I look from my father to Trent. Trent is standing just behind my parents, a sickeningly smug grin plastered across his face. He feels invincible. He has the matriarch and patriarch of the family actively fighting his battles for him, serving up my inheritance on a silver platter. He does not even have to raise his voice because my parents are doing the dirty work for him. It is the ultimate betrayal watching my own flesh and blood prioritize his comfort over my rightful ownership. Hand over the keys right now, Kendra, my father demands, his voice rising, echoing across the quiet lakefront. Give Trent the keys and sign the transfer documents Jada brought. If you refuse to comply, Trent is going to call his private security detail. They will physically remove you from the premises and we will make sure you are tied up in litigation so fast, your little accounting business goes bankrupt paying the legal fees. Do not force us to treat you like a trespasser on your grandfather's property. The threat is clear, calculated, and vicious. They are willing to use physical force and financial ruin to break me. They expect me to crumble right here on the porch. They expect the quiet, responsible daughter who always stayed in the background, who always absorbed their criticism without a fight to finally bow her head. They expect me to apologize for the inconvenience, hand over the keys, and surrender my grandfather's dying wish just to keep the peace and maintain the family image. I do not flinch. I do not shed a single tear. My heartbeat is steady, a calm drum rhythm against my ribs. The scared, overlooked middle child died the moment I read my grandfather's letter in the lawyer's office. I am no longer the daughter seeking their validation. I am a forensic accountant who has tracked down hidden assets of billionaires and put ruthless white-collar criminals behind bars. I analyze data. I find the weak points, and I strike with precision. I do not crack under pressure. I thrive in it. I look directly into Trent's eyes. I watch that smug, arrogant grin stretch from ear to ear. He thinks he has won. He thinks he holds all the cards because he has a fancy corporate title and my parents' blind allegiance. He has absolutely no idea that I spent the last 48 hours tearing through his company's digital ledgers. He has no idea that I know exactly why he is so desperate to get his hands on my grandfather's $18 million. He is drowning in his own criminal activities, and he thinks I am going to be his life raft. He thinks this family's wealth is going to bail him out of federal prison. I reach slowly into my jacket pocket. My father takes a half step forward, relaxing his shoulders, clearly assuming I am finally reaching for the house keys to surrender them. Instead, my fingers close around the cool metal of my smartphone. I pull it out. "Who are you calling?" Jada snaps, stepping out from behind Trent, her phone still recording every second of this encounter. "Are you calling the local police?" Trent already spoke to the sheriff. They know this is a family dispute over a trust. They are not going to help you, Kendra. You are entirely on your own out here. I ignore her completely. Her voice is just white noise. I keep my eyes deadlocked on Trent. I watch his confident posture falter for a fraction of a second as I unlock my screen. The arrogance in his eyes flickers, replaced by a sudden creeping unease. He can sense the shift in the atmosphere. He is a predator who suddenly realizes he has walked directly into a trap. He can tell that I am entirely too calm for a woman who is supposedly backed into a corner with no way out. I press the speed dial for the only contact I have engaged with since arriving at the lake house this morning. The line rings once. It connects immediately. I do not break eye contact with my brother-in-law. I want him to remember this exact moment for the rest of his life. They are here. I speak clearly and evenly into the receiver. Bring them in. 72 hours before Trent threatened me with private security on my own front porch, the entire family was gathered at the country club for my grandparents' repast. Elias and Ruby had passed away suddenly in a private plane crash just 3 weeks prior. The shock of their sudden deaths had shattered my world completely. They were the true pillars of our family. They were the ones who built a multi-million-dollar logistics empire from a single delivery truck in the segregated South. My grandfather taught me how to read a balance sheet before I was in middle school, and my grandmother taught me that absolute integrity was the only currency that truly mattered. But as I stood in the corner of the grand ballroom clutching a glass of sparkling water, I realized I was the only person in the room actually mourning their absence. To my parents and my sister, this was not a funeral reception honoring two incredible lives. It was a high society networking event for the city's black elite. The room was packed with custom-tailored morning suits, expensive black lace dresses, and the subtle glint of prestigious fraternity and sorority pins. Instead of sharing fond memories of my grandfather's relentless resilience or my grandmother's incredible warmth, the air hummed with the sound of clinking glasses and calculated business pitches. Waiters carrying trays of expensive hors d'oeuvres navigated through clusters of people who were far more interested in their own upward mobility than paying their respects to the deceased. I watched my mother Vivian glide across the room holding court with local politicians and city council members. She wore a black designer dress that looked far more appropriate for an exclusive gala than a memorial service. She was already leveraging the tragedy to secure her social standing, laughing politely at a joke made by the district attorney. My father Desmond stood nearby, shaking hands with banking executives. He was projecting the image of the grieving but stoic patriarch, ready to take the reins of a massive fortune. They were completely unbothered by the sudden loss of the people who had given them everything. They were only focused on the capital that was about to flow directly into their personal bank accounts. Across the room, my sister Jada was surrounded by her affluent socialite friends. She was speaking loudly enough for half the room to hear. Her voice carried easily over the soft jazz playing in the background. She was already spending the inheritance in her head. I listened in absolute disbelief as she casually discussed bulldozing Grandpa Elias' central logistics hubs, the very warehouses where he had worked 18-hour days to secure our family future were nothing but a quick real estate flip to her. She waved her hand dismissively, telling her friends that Trent had a brilliant plan to rezone the industrial lots and build luxury waterfront condos. She bragged about how the new family capital would elevate them to a completely different tax bracket. She did not care about the hundreds of loyal employees who had worked for my grandfather for decades. She only cared about her upcoming luxury vacations, her designer wardrobe, and securing her spot at the absolute top of the social ladder. I tried to fade further into the background, focusing on the beautiful floral arrangements my grandmother would have loved. But in this family, I was never allowed to just exist in peace. My father spotted me from across the room. He did not walk over to offer comfort or ask how I was holding up after losing the only two people who truly loved and understood me. He marched over with Trent trailing right behind him. Desmond stopped a few feet away and literally snapped his fingers at me. The sharp sound cut through the grief I was trying so desperately to hold together. Kendra stopped standing around looking miserable. He snapped, his tone laced with that familiar irritation he always reserved for me. "You are bringing down the mood of the entire room. Go to the bar and fetch Trent a glass of bourbon. He has been busy fielding condolences all afternoon and needs a drink." I stared at my father, feeling a cold knot form in my stomach. My grandfather had just been laid to rest, and my father was treating me like the hired catering staff. Trent stood there, adjusting his expensive tie, looking incredibly pleased with the power dynamic. He did not offer to get his own drink. He simply waited for me to obey the family hierarchy. They were already celebrating their impending wealth, discussing the restructuring of the logistics company right in front of me, as if my grandfather's life work was just a pinata waiting to be smashed open. Trent even had the audacity to tell my father that they needed to schedule a board meeting by Monday morning to expedite the liquidation of the transport fleet. I did not argue. Arguing with Desmond in public only ever resulted in Vivian rushing over to accuse me of causing a scene and embarrassing the family name. I set my glass down on a passing waiter's tray and walked toward the heavy oak bar at the back of the room. Every step felt incredibly heavy. I realized then that they truly viewed me as nothing more than a servant in my own family. The plain, quiet daughter who audited spreadsheets while the golden child and her corporate white husband prepared to inherit the kingdom. As I waited for the bartender to pour Trent's bourbon, a gentle hand touched my shoulder. I turned and found Mr. Harrison standing beside me. He was my grandparents' longtime estate lawyer, a distinguished older black man who had been Elias' trusted confidant for over 30 years. He looked at the room full of networking opportunists with a quiet, profound disgust. Mr. Harrison had known me since I was a little girl doing math homework at my grandfather's warehouse desk. He knew the dynamics of this toxic family better than anyone outside of it. He gently guided me away from the bar, steering me into a quiet, soundproofed hallway, away from the noise of the reception and the greedy, grasping hands of my relatives. He looked me directly in the eyes, his expression a mix of deep sorrow and fierce determination. He patted my arm and leaned in close, making sure no one else in the corridor could hear our conversation. "I see how they are acting out there, Kendra," he said, his voice a low, steady rumble of disapproval. "I hear what your sister is planning for the company. They think they have the entire board already mapped out. They think the reading of the will tomorrow morning is just a formality before they start liquidating your grandfather's legacy to fund their lifestyle." I nodded, swallowing the painful lump in my throat. "I know, Mr. Harrison. They have been planning how to spend the money since the plane went down. They have not shed a single real tear all week." Mr. Harrison gave a small, tight smile that did not reach his eyes. He straightened his perfectly tailored suit jacket and looked back toward the heavy ballroom doors. "Let them celebrate tonight," he whispered, his tone shifting into something remarkably sharp. "Let them drink their expensive bourbon and make their grand real estate plans. I want you to be in my office tomorrow morning at 9 sharp. Dress well and brace yourself, Kendra. Your parents and your sister are in for a very rude awakening." The next morning, I walked into the reception area of Harrison and Associates exactly at 9 o'clock. I wore a tailored navy blue suit with my hair pulled back into a sleek, tight bun. It was my armor for the battle I knew was coming. The receptionist ushered me into the main conference room. The space was highly intimidating. It was lined with floor-to-ceiling mahogany bookshelves and smelled strongly of expensive leather and old paper. My family was already there, and they had completely taken over the room as if they owned the entire law firm. Trent had actually positioned himself at the very head of the massive conference table. That was a seat clearly meant for the executing attorney, but Trent felt absolutely entitled to it. He had a thick, glossy binder open in front of him. I glanced at the cover and felt my jaw tighten with anger. It was a printed 10-year investment portfolio featuring my grandfather's logistics company logo, crudely copied next to Trent's own corporate investment firm crest. He was not even waiting for the legal transfer of assets before pitching his corporate takeover. He was acting as the de facto head of our family, dictating the future of a legacy he had no part in building. My father, Desmond, sat to Trent's right. He was nodding approvingly as his white son-in-law pointed to various charts and graphs detailing how they would dismantle the business. My mother, Vivian, was sipping sparkling water from a crystal glass. She was complaining loudly to anyone who would listen about the morning traffic on the drive over, acting as if this reading was just a minor inconvenience in her social calendar. Jada sat across from them, scrolling aggressively through luxury real estate listings on her phone. She was already picking out the massive waterfront property she planned to buy with her inheritance. When I walked through the door, they barely paused their conversation. Desmond shot me a quick, irritated glance. He told me to sit at the far end of the table out of the way so the adults could handle the complex financial matters. I did exactly as he asked. I pulled out a chair at the opposite end of the long mahogany table. I placed my hands flat on the cool polished surface and waited in silence. Trent tapped his expensive gold pen against his binder. He told everyone that once the legal formalities were out of the way, he would need Desmond to sign proxy rights over to him by noon. He confidently stated that the market was ripe for liquidating heavy machinery. He bragged that he already had eager corporate buyers lined up for my grandfather's massive transport fleet. He assured my parents that by Friday he would have the logistics hubs shut down and the land surveyed for luxury real estate development. He spoke about my grandfather's life work as if it were a cheap garage sale. He was completely ready to dismantle a black empire to line his own pockets, and my parents were practically handing him the sledgehammer. I sat quietly and watched them count money that did not belong to them. I remembered Mr. Harrison's warning from the funeral and kept my face perfectly neutral. The heavy wooden door opened and Mr. Harrison walked in carrying a single thick manila folder. He stopped and looked directly at Trent, sitting arrogant and relaxed in his chair at the head of the table. Mr. Harrison did not ask him to move. He simply stood beside the door, radiating an absolute, unwavering authority that made the entire room fall dead silent. He walked over to the side of the table, opened the folder, and adjusted his reading glasses. He did not offer any condolences or polite small talk. He looked directly at Desmond and Vivian. Then he looked down at the legal document. He began to read the last will and testament of Elias and Ruby. He listed off the charitable donations, first reading each line with careful precision. $500,000 to their childhood church. $200,000 to the historically black college they attended decades ago. Trent sighed heavily, shifting in his stolen seat. He muttered something under his breath about wasted capital and inefficient tax write-offs. My mother shushed him gently, but she nodded in agreement with his assessment. They were growing incredibly impatient. They wanted to skip the charity, they wanted the main event, they wanted the keys to the kingdom. Mr. Harrison turned to the final page of the document. He cleared his throat and his voice grew much louder, resonating off the dark mahogany walls. Regarding the entirety of my remaining estate, he read, "This includes the $4 million primary residence in Lake Geneva. This includes the $18 million private investment portfolio. This includes 100% of the controlling shares in Elias Logistics Incorporated." The room was so quiet, you could hear the hum of the air conditioning flowing through the ceiling vents. Trent leaned forward, gripping his gold pen so tightly his knuckles turned white. Desmond sat up straight, adjusting the lapels of his expensive suit jacket. Jada locked the screen of her phone and stared eagerly at the lawyer, ready to hear her name called out as a newly minted millionaire. "I leave these assets entirely and without any condition to my granddaughter Kendra." Mr. Harrison closed the folder with a sharp thud. He took off his glasses and looked around the room. He did not say another word. Total, absolute silence dropped over the conference room. It was the kind of heavy, suffocating silence that follows a bomb detonation just before the shockwave actually hits you. I watched the smug, confident grin slowly melt off Trent's face. It was replaced by a pale, sickly pallor of absolute shock. His gold pen slipped from his numb fingers and clattered loudly onto his glossy portfolio. Vivian dropped her crystal glass. It shattered violently against the hardwood floor, sending sparkling water and sharp shards flying across her expensive designer shoes. Then the shockwave finally hit. Jada slammed both her hands down on the table and let out an ear-piercing scream. She shrieked that the document was a complete fake. She yelled that Mr. Harrison was lying and that I had somehow manipulated a dying old man into changing his will. Her voice bounced off the walls, shrill and desperate and filled with venom. She demanded to see the paper accusing me of stealing her entire future and ruining her life. Before I could even stand up from my chair, Desmond lost his mind. He lunged entirely across the wide mahogany table. He knocked over heavy leather chairs and sent Trent's glossy investment portfolio crashing to the floor in a mess of loose papers. His large hand clamped down around my wrist like a steel vise. His fingers dug brutally into my skin as he pulled me violently toward him across the smooth wood. His eyes were wide with pure, unadulterated rage. He was no longer the polished suburban patriarch networking at a country club. He was a man watching $18 million slip through his fingers, and he was ready to destroy me to get it back. His grip is painful, but I do not give him the satisfaction of a wince. I plant my feet firmly against the carpeted floor and glare right back into his furious eyes. "Fix this!" My father snarls, his spit flying across the polished mahogany. "You are going to correct this massive insult to the family hierarchy right now, Kendra. You will sign a total forfeiture of these assets and place them directly into a family trust. Trent will be the sole managing director. You are going to undo whatever sick manipulation you played on your grandfather, or so help me God, I will end you." My mother has recovered from dropping her glass. She steps up right behind Desmond with her chest heaving. "Do you realize what you have done?" she screams, her voice echoing shrilly. "You have humiliated us. You have stolen your sister's future. You are a spiteful, jealous girl who could never measure up to Jada, so you poisoned a dying man's mind. Sign the assets over to Trent. It is the only way you will ever be allowed to show your face in our family again." I look from Vivian to Desmond. I look at Jada, who is sobbing dramatically into her hands, playing the victim, while her husband calculates his next move. The sheer audacity of their demands is staggering. They genuinely believe that because I have always been the quiet one, the one who handled the background work, while they took the spotlight, I will simply surrender an $18 million empire because they raised their voices. I twist my arm sharply, leveraging my weight against the edge of the table, and forcefully yank my wrist out of my father's grip. The sudden release throws him slightly off balance. "Do not ever put your hands on me again," I state, my voice dropping to a dangerous, icy whisper that commands the room far better than their screaming. I adjust my suit jacket and stand up straight, refusing to shrink away from them. I did not manipulate anyone. Grandfather Elias spent 40 years breaking his back in shipping yards. He built his wealth on sweat equity, on late nights, on pure, relentless hard work. He did not build it on entitlement. He did not build it so a group of greedy socialites could liquidate his legacy to buy luxury condos and designer bags. I turn my attention directly to Trent, who is currently trying to salvage his scattered portfolio from the floor. And he certainly did not build an empire to hand it over to a white corporate opportunist who thinks he can marry into black generational wealth and dismantle it for parts. I am not signing a single thing over to you. I am not putting a dime into a trust you manage. The logistics firm is mine. The real estate is mine. And your free ride on my family's dime is officially over. Trent stands up slowly. His face is pale, and a visible vein pulses in his neck. His mask of corporate superiority has completely shattered. He is looking at me not with the annoyance he usually reserves for me, but with pure, unadulterated hatred. "That is quite enough!" Mr. Harrison's voice booms across the room. He steps forward, placing himself firmly between me and my furious family. He is an elderly man, but he carries the weight of the law and decades of experience. "If any of you attempt to physically intimidate my client again, I will have security escort you out of this building, and I will personally press assault charges." Desmond stepped back. My father glares at the lawyer, but he takes a begrudging step backward. He knows Mr. Harrison is not a man who makes empty threats. The will is ironclad. Mr. Harrison continues, adjusting his posture and addressing the room with absolute finality. Elias was of completely sound mind. 2 independent medical professionals evaluated him the day he signed this document. It was recorded, notarized, and witnessed by senior partners at this firm. There is no manipulation here. There is only the explicit legal directive of the deceased. Mr. Harrison turns his back to my parents and looks directly at me. His stern expression softens just a fraction. He reaches into the inside breast pocket of his tailored suit jacket and pulls out a heavy cream-colored envelope. It is sealed with red wax. I instantly recognize the thick, bold handwriting on the front. It says, "For Kendra only. Your grandfather asked me to give this to you personally after the reading." Mr. Harrison says, extending his hand toward me. He said it contains everything you need to know about why he made this decision. He also said it will give you the tools you need for the road ahead. I reach out my hand to accept the final message from the man who meant the world to me. My fingertips are just inches away from the heavy parchment. Suddenly, a blur of motion cuts across my peripheral vision. Trent lunges forward with startling speed. Before my fingers can even brush the paper, he aggressively snatches the envelope right out of Mr. Harrison's hand. "Hey!" I shout, lunging forward to grab it back. "Give that back immediately!" Mr. Harrison commands, his voice rising in outrage. "That is private property. Taking that constitutes theft." Trent takes 2 rapid steps backward, putting distance between himself and the lawyer. He does not even glance at the warning. He swiftly folds the thick envelope in half and shoves it deep into the inside breast pocket of his suit jacket. He pats the pocket flat, securing his stolen prize. "You are not getting anything." Trent sneers, his lips curling into a vicious, desperate smile. He looks at me with eyes full of venom. "You think you won, Kendra. You think because some old man signed a piece of paper you get to walk away with $18 million. You are nothing but a small-time accountant." He straightens his tie, reassembling his corporate armor right in front of me. "We are contesting this immediately. We are filing for an emergency injunction to freeze every single asset in that estate. You will not see a dime, Kendra. I will personally make sure you are tied up in litigation until you are completely bankrupt. I will bleed your little firm dry with legal fees. By the time I am done with you, you will be begging to sign that trust over to me just to afford your rent." My father stands beside him, nodding in agreement, perfectly willing to let his son-in-law wage legal warfare against his own daughter. My mother and sister look on with vindictive satisfaction, entirely convinced that Trent has the power to crush me. I stare at Trent, noting the slight tremor in his hands despite his bold threats. He is projecting power, but I can smell the sheer panic rolling off him. He just stole a letter meant for me because he is terrified of what my grandfather might have written inside it. He is threatening me with financial ruin because he knows it is the only weapon he has left. He thinks I am just going to cower and wait for his lawyers to serve me with papers. He thinks I am the same quiet girl who used to fetch him drinks at family barbecues. He has absolutely no idea that his declaration of war has just unlocked a version of me they are completely unprepared to fight. I did not wait around the mahogany conference room to watch my family celebrate their stolen prize. I walked out of that law office with my head held high, my heels clicking a steady, unbothered rhythm against the polished hardwood floor. Trent had managed to snatch my grandfather's final letter, but I had the airtight legal backing of the will and a mind specifically trained to dismantle complex financial crimes. I knew they would strike back quickly, but I vastly underestimated just how vicious my own mother could be when her access to generational wealth and her carefully curated social standing were threatened. Within 48 hours, Vivian deployed her most lethal and untraceable weapon, her social network. My mother is a legacy member of one of the most prestigious Black sororities in the country and sits on the executive board of the city's most exclusive country club. In our affluent circles, she does not just attend high society galas, she orchestrates them. She dictates who is welcomed into the fold and who is quietly exiled. Following the reading of the will, she weaponized that immense social influence with terrifying calculated precision. Through the wealthy grapevine of catered charity luncheons, exclusive alumni group chats, and private country club tennis matches, Vivian began spinning a masterful, devastating narrative of tragedy and betrayal. She played the heartbroken, dutiful daughter to absolute perfection. She wore dark, understated designer dresses and dabbed at her eyes with silk handkerchiefs, while telling everyone who would listen that grandfather Elias and grandmother Ruby had been suffering from severe undocumented cognitive decline in their final months. She fabricated an elaborate, horrific story that I had swooped in during their most vulnerable moments, manipulated their dementia-riddled minds, and coerced them into altering their estate plans. She told local politicians, influential doctors, and wealthy investors that I had ruthlessly barred the family from the hospital room, leveraging my accounting background to blindside my dying grandparents with confusing legal jargon. She painted Jada and Trent as the innocent, grieving victims who had been robbed of their rightful future by a jealous, calculating spinster sister. The affluent Black community in this city is tightly knit. Word travels fast, and professional reputation is the ultimate currency. It did not take long for my mother's toxic whispers to bleed out of the country club dining rooms and seep directly into the corporate sector where I made my living. I was sitting at my desk on a Wednesday morning, reviewing a complex risk assessment matrix for a corporate merger, when my assistant Jasmine buzzed my line. Her voice was unusually tight, lacking its normal cheerful cadence. She told me the chief executive officer from Apex Innovations was on line 1, and he sounded incredibly agitated. Apex was my firm's anchor client. They provided the steady, massive quarterly revenue that allowed me to hire my staff and keep my independent auditing firm running. I picked up the phone expecting a routine question about their upcoming compliance audit. Instead, I received a brutal masterclass in corporate distancing. The CEO did not even bother to exchange basic pleasantries. He coldly and abruptly informed me that Apex Innovations was terminating our auditing contract effective immediately. I sat up straight in my chair, the pen slipping from my fingers. I kept my voice perfectly level, suppressing the sudden spike of panic in my chest. I pressed him for a concrete reason, demanding to know if there was a specific discrepancy with our data analysis or a breach in our service level agreement. He cleared his throat uncomfortably, the sound amplified over the phone line. He stated that his board of directors could not risk associating their corporate financial data with an auditing firm whose founder was currently entangled in concerning rumors regarding professional integrity and potential elder exploitation. Before I could even process the catastrophic loss of my biggest client, defend my name, or offer a rebuttal, he hung up. The dial tone echoed in my ear like a warning siren. 10 minutes later, the phone rang again. It was the chief financial officer of a regional hospital network, another massive account that served as a foundational pillar for my business. The script was identical. They were pulling their business immediately. The CFO cited a sudden need to consolidate their vendors, but her icy tone and refusal to look me in the eye over our video call gave her true motives away entirely. My mother had not just slandered me as a disobedient daughter, she had deliberately and surgically assassinated my character as a forensic accountant. In my specific line of work, absolute trust and unquestionable ethics are everything. If corporate clients believe you are capable of manipulating your own dying grandparents to steal an $18 million estate, they will absolutely never trust you to audit their confidential corporate ledgers. Vivian knew exactly what she was doing. By attacking my reputation, she was systematically destroying my livelihood, cutting off my independent income to force me into crawling back to the family on my knees. I needed to secure my remaining liquid assets and ensure my staff got paid before the industry panic spread through my own office. I could not let my employees suffer because my family was waging a shadow war against me. I locked my office door, pulled up my commercial banking portal on my secure monitor, and prepared to run the weekly payroll. I typed in my encrypted credentials, fully expecting to see the healthy, robust operating buffer I had meticulously maintained for the past 3 years. I had built this firm from the ground up, and my financials were always flawless. Instead, the screen flashed a bold, aggressive red error message. I blinked, assuming it was a temporary glitch in the banking server. I refreshed the page, my heart beginning to hammer a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The numbers reloaded and my blood ran completely ice cold. My primary business checking account, which had held hundreds of thousands of dollars in operational capital just yesterday afternoon, was displaying a negative balance. It was completely overdrawn. A hard freeze had been placed on all outgoing wire transfers, vendor payments, and employee direct deposits. I immediately dialed my regional bank manager, Carlton, a man I had done highly profitable business with since the very day I opened my firm. He answered on the fourth ring, and the heavy, terrified silence on the other end of the line told me everything I needed to know before he even spoke a single word. I bypassed all greetings and demanded to know exactly why my corporate accounts were locked and drained without a single fraud alert phone call or official notification. Carlton stammered, his usual confident, polished banking persona entirely shattered. He told me his hands were completely tied by the regional executives above him. I demanded a legal justification, reminding him that freezing a corporate account without a court order was a massive liability. He lowered his voice to an anxious, frantic whisper. He confessed that my father Desmond had paid a highly discreet personal visit to the regional banking executives at their downtown headquarters that very morning. My father had leveraged his decades of heavyweight financial connections, calling in every country club favor and golf course handshake he had accumulated over his long career. Desmond had successfully pressured the banking executives to flag all of my personal and business accounts under a high-priority internal investigation for pending elder abuse and major financial fraud. Because my father was a recognized titan in the local financial sector, the bank bypassed the standard requirement for an immediate judge's signature. They applied a preemptive security freeze on my assets, effectively trapping my money behind bureaucratic red tape that could take weeks if not months to untangle. Desmond had financially paralyzed my entire operation with a single conversation. I hung up the phone and stared at the red numbers glaring on my computer screen. The room felt suddenly devoid of oxygen. Trent had promised to tie me up in litigation until I was bankrupt, but my parents had decided to accelerate the timeline. They had stripped me of my clients, destroyed my professional reputation, and cut off my access to my own hard-earned money. They had boxed me into a corner, assuming I would panic, break down, and surrender my grandfather's legacy just to survive. They wanted me destitute, desperate, and compliant. I slowly closed my laptop, the red screen fading to black. I took a deep, stabilizing breath. They had just launched a coordinated, ruthless attack to drain my resources. But they had forgotten one crucial detail. I am a forensic accountant. I do not just know how to count money. I know exactly how to hunt it down. I did not waste a single second screaming into the void of my empty office. Panic is a luxury I cannot afford. I picked up my phone and dialed my father directly. Desmond answered on the second ring. His voice was smooth, relaxed, and entirely too casual for a Wednesday morning. He sounded exactly like a man who had just played a winning hand at a high-stakes poker table and was simply waiting for his opponent to fold. I bypassed any familial greeting. I demanded to know exactly what kind of strings he pulled to freeze my operational capital. He chuckled. It was a deep, condescending sound that vibrated through the receiver and made my blood run hot. He did not deny my accusation. In fact, he was eager to claim the credit. Desmond calmly informed me that the business accounts were just the opening maneuver. He had spent the previous evening dining at the country club with a local superior court judge, an old fraternity brother who owed him a significant favor. By 8 o'clock this morning, they had successfully filed an emergency ex parte injunction. Every single liquid asset attached to grandfather Elias and his $18 million estate was officially frozen under the guise of a pending legal dispute regarding elder abuse. I was completely financially stranded. My father had weaponized the legal system to cut off my oxygen. I thought about my employees immediately. I thought about Jasmine, my executive assistant, who just returned from maternity leave and relied on her direct deposit to pay for childcare. I thought about David, my lead forensic analyst, who was closing on his first house next week. Desmond knew exactly what he was doing. He was holding innocent people hostage, targeting the people I cared about to break my resolve. He wanted me desperate enough to sign anything. "You are making this unnecessarily difficult on yourself, Kendra," my father said, utilizing his signature corporate negotiation voice. It was the exact tone he used to dismantle rival firms and intimidate junior partners. "We do not want to destroy what you have built. You can either be a team player and cooperate with the family, or you can lose your little business by Friday when your payroll bounces. The choice is entirely yours." A team player. That specific phrase triggered a visceral physical reaction deep in my chest. My grip on the phone tightened until my knuckles turned ash white. It was the exact same terminology he used during my sophomore year of college. The memory hit me with staggering clarity. I was 19 years old, taking 18 credit hours to graduate early and working grueling night shifts at a 24-hour diner just off campus. I needed exactly $1,200 to cover a sudden tuition shortfall and purchase my advanced accounting textbooks. I had exhausted my meager savings. I swallowed my pride, called Desmond, and asked for a simple short-term loan. I promised to pay him back with interest by the end of the semester. He had sighed heavily into the phone, telling me I needed to be a team player and understand shifting family priorities. Those priorities, he explained, meant cutting off my financial safety net entirely so he and Vivian could fully fund Jada's luxury gap year in Paris. Jada had decided that university was too stressful and she needed to find herself in Europe. While I was scrubbing spilled coffee off diner tables at 2 in the morning, nursing chemical burns on my hands from cheap cleaning supplies, Jada was posting perfectly curated photos of herself, drinking vintage champagne near the Eiffel Tower. She was dragging designer luggage through the streets of Milan, all financed by the same parents who claimed they had absolutely nothing to spare for my education. They starved my ambition to feed her boundless entitlement. They conditioned her to believe that my resources, my labor, and my sacrifices were simply collateral damage in the pursuit of her happiness. They were using the exact same playbook right now. Starve me out, cut off my resources, force me to submit to the golden child so she could continue living a life she never earned. "I am not a starving 19-year-old girl anymore, Dad," I stated, my voice dropping to a dangerous icy register. "You are not holding my textbook money hostage. You are actively attempting to bankrupt my firm to cover up the fact that your white son-in-law is trying to steal black generational wealth. If you think starving my business is going to make me sign over grandfather Elias and his legacy, you have vastly underestimated who you are dealing with." Desmond let out a sharp, irritated breath. "You are entirely out of your depth, Kendra. Trent has retained top-tier corporate litigators. You have a frozen bank account and a rapidly ticking clock. Do not force us to ruin you completely. Just sign the trust paperwork and we can all move on as a family." I hung up the phone. I did not give him the satisfaction of hearing my breathing accelerate. I did not offer a parting threat. Silence is a much sharper weapon. I walked over to the floor-to-ceiling windows of my office, looking out at the sprawling city skyline. I needed an immediate tactical plan. Desmond thought I was cornered, but he did not know about the private encrypted emergency reserve I maintained specifically for catastrophic business interruptions. I had enough personal capital quietly stashed away in a completely separate banking institution to cover my payroll and operational expenses for exactly 3 weeks. My staff would be paid on time. They would never even know the firm was under attack. I refused to let my father claim a single casualty in my office. But 3 weeks was a rapidly shrinking runway. I needed to shift from defensive maneuvering to an absolute offensive strike. Trent wanted to play corporate warfare. I was going to show him exactly why grandfather Elias trusted me with the keys to the kingdom. I began mentally mapping out the digital architecture of Trent's investment firm, formulating the parameters of the ghost audit I was about to launch. If Trent was this desperate to liquidate my grandfather's assets, he was hiding a massive liability in his own ledgers. I just needed to find the bleeding wound. Suddenly, a sharp, authoritative knock echoed through my apartment. I had left the office and returned to my secure high-rise apartment to initiate the deep dive on Trent's company away from my corporate network. The sudden noise broke my concentration. I lived in a secure building with a rigorous concierge desk. Unannounced visitors simply did not happen. I walked quietly over to the security monitor mounted on the wall by my front door. I tapped the screen and the high-definition camera feed from the hallway flickered to life. Standing right outside my door were Jada and Trent. They had completely shifted their demeanor from the aggressive hostile invaders who had kicked my luggage off the lake house porch. Trent was wearing a soft, casual cashmere sweater instead of his rigid corporate suit. He was holding a glossy leather document portfolio, tucked casually under his arm. Jada was standing slightly in front of him wearing a soft pastel cardigan. She was holding a large pink bakery box from my absolute favorite artisanal pastry shop downtown. They were wearing perfectly synchronized expressions of deep manufactured sympathy. They looked like concerned, loving family members dropping by to check on a relative in distress. It was a masterful, sickening performance. The strategy was flawlessly executed. Desmond and Vivian had played the role of the ruthless bad cops. They had frozen my accounts, terrified my bank manager, and isolated me financially. Now Jada and Trent had arrived to play the benevolent peacemakers. They were here to offer me the poisoned apple wrapped in a pretty pink bakery box. They expected me to be terrified, exhausted, and desperately looking for a way out of the financial chokehold Desmond had just placed on my neck. They expected me to open the door, accept the pastries, and sign my legacy away just to make the pain stop. I stared at the security monitor, watching Trent check his expensive watch while Jada practiced her concerned, sisterly pout for the camera. I took a slow, deep breath, mentally locking my armor into place. I reached out and unlatched the deadbolt, ready to let the wolves inside. I pull the heavy front door open, stepping back to let them inside. Jada enters first, carrying the pink bakery box with both hands, like it is a peace offering to a hostile nation. Her designer perfume immediately fills my entryway, sharp and cloying. Trent follows close behind her, shedding his tailored cashmere coat. He takes a long, slow look around my high-rise apartment. I can see his eyes darting across the custom light fixtures, the expansive city view, the expensive modern art on the walls. He is silently calculating the square footage, trying to reconcile the glorified bookkeeper narrative he has been fed with the undeniable reality of my financial success. Jada sets the bakery box on my marble kitchen island with a soft sigh. She looks at me with wide, sorrowful eyes, perfectly executing the role of the heartbroken sister caught in the middle of a family war. She tells me how much she hates seeing us fight. She says Mom and Dad are just overwhelmed with grief and acting out of character, completely ignoring the fact that Desmond just froze my corporate bank accounts a few hours ago. Trent steps up beside her, placing a supportive hand on her lower back. He gives me a practiced, empathetic smile, the kind of smile he uses to calm nervous investors before asking them to wire millions of dollars into his funds. He sets his glossy leather document portfolio on the island right next to the pastries. He tells me that things got out of hand at the lawyer's office, and he wants to make things right. He says he understands that grandfather Elias wanted me to have the lake house, and he completely respects that. He is willing to concede the $4 million property to me free and clear. All he is asking for is a compromise regarding the logistics empire and the investment portfolio. Trent opens the leather folder, revealing a thick stack of legal documents printed on heavy, expensive bond paper. He speaks in a smooth, rhythmic cadence, using corporate buzzwords designed to sound comforting and logical. He suggests we place 80% of the business assets into a family trust. He tells me that managing a commercial logistics fleet and a massive stock portfolio is an absolute nightmare of tax liabilities and regulatory headaches. He offers to take on that immense burden himself as the sole managing director of the trust. He frames it as a massive favor. He claims he wants me to be free to focus on my independent auditing firm without the crushing weight of Elias Logistics dragging me down. He slides a silver pen across the marble island toward me, pointing to a flagged signature line on the final page. Jada steps closer, her voice soft and pleading. She begs me to just sign the paperwork so we can go back to being a family. She promises that Trent will make sure I am taken care of, that we will all win if I just stop being so stubborn. I look at the silver pen. Then I look at Trent. I do not reach for the pen. I reach for the document. I am a forensic accountant. My entire career is built on the fundamental truth that people lie, but numbers never do. I do not sign anything without reading the fine print, and I certainly do not sign legally binding contracts handed to me by a man who threatened to bankrupt me just yesterday. I ignore the summary pages. I ignore the boilerplate language about family unity and shared dividends. I flip directly to the middle of the stack, scanning the dense paragraphs of legal jargon. Pages 1 through 13 are standard trust formation documents. They outline the transfer of assets, the management hierarchy, and the fiduciary responsibilities. It all looks perfectly normal to an untrained eye. Then I hit page 14. I stop flipping. My eyes lock onto a dense block of text buried under a misleading subheading about asset protection. It is an indemnity and assumption of liabilities clause. The legal phrasing is incredibly dense, deliberately convoluted, and wrapped in multiple layers of corporate cross-referencing. But I translate financial deception for a living. I read the paragraph twice, and the sheer audacity of what Trent is attempting to do makes my blood run freezing cold. This is not a family trust agreement. This is a financial suicide pact. The clause explicitly states that by transferring the $18 million estate into the trust, the primary beneficiary, which is me, agrees to cross-collateralize the new assets against the managing director's existing corporate holdings. In plain English, Trent has quietly inserted a legal trapdoor that makes my newly inherited $18 million and my own personal business assets legally and personally liable for his primary investment firm's outstanding debts. He is not trying to manage my grandfather's legacy. He is trying to use it as a massive involuntary shield to absorb a catastrophic financial blow. I slowly close the leather folder. The sound of the heavy cover slapping shut echoes loudly in the quiet kitchen. I look at Jada. I look deep into her eyes, searching for any sign of hesitation or guilt. I ask her point blank if she has any idea what is written on page 14 of this document. She blinks, her performative sorrow faltering, and she quickly looks away, shifting her gaze to the floor. She knows. My own sister knows exactly what this document is designed to do. I turn my attention to Trent. His empathetic smile is frozen in place, but I can see a muscle feathering in his jaw. I push the silver pen back across the marble island. I tell him exactly what I found. I recite the indemnity clause back to him word for word, stripping away the legal jargon and exposing the naked theft underneath. I ask him how deep in the red his supposedly successful investment firm actually is. I ask him how many millions he has lost, and why he is so utterly desperate to legally bind my grandfather's clean money to his sinking ship. Trent's mask completely shatters. The soft, casual cashmere sweater suddenly looks entirely out of place on a man whose face has twisted into an ugly, cornered sneer. He drops the benevolent peacemaker act in a heartbeat. He steps toward me, slamming his hand flat against the marble countertop. He demands I sign the document, his voice dropping into a harsh, threatening bark. He reminds me that Desmond has already frozen my bank accounts. He tells me I have no operational capital, no leverage, and no way to fight his legal team. He says, if I do not sign this trust agreement right now, my father will make sure my auditing firm is permanently destroyed by the end of the week. I do not raise my voice. I simply point to the small, blinking red light of the security camera mounted discreetly in the corner of my kitchen ceiling. I tell them both to get out of my apartment. Jada opens her mouth to argue, her face flushing with anger and panic, but I cut her off. I tell her that if they are not out of my home, in exactly 10 seconds I will forward the security footage of Trent attempting to coerce me into a fraudulent contract directly to the State Ethics Board. Trent snatches the leather portfolio off the island, knowing full well it is physical evidence of his attempted financial crime. He grabs his coat, his face pale with fury. He grabs Jada by the arm and pulls her toward the door. They do not say another word. They march out of my apartment, their grand manipulation tactic completely dismantled in under 5 minutes. I follow them to the door and slam it shut behind them. I engage the heavy steel deadbolt. The lock clicks into place with a loud, satisfying mechanical snap. The apartment falls completely silent. The pink bakery box sits untouched on the island. The adrenaline hits my bloodstream, a sharp electric rush of pure clarity. Trent is not just a greedy corporate opportunist looking to score an easy $18 million. The indemnity clause proves he is financially bleeding out. He is actively hiding a catastrophic loss, and he is willing to commit federal fraud to cover his tracks. He is using my parents as attack dogs to force me into compliance because he is completely out of time. I walk directly to my home office. I sit down in my ergonomic chair and power on my multi-monitor workstation. I boot up the encrypted VPN and access my firm's secure remote servers. My father might have frozen my standard business accounts, but he cannot touch my digital infrastructure. If Trent is trying to offload massive corporate debt onto me, he has to be hiding it somewhere in his public filings. I crack my knuckles, pull up the financial regulatory databases, and type his investment firm's name into my tracking software. I start the ghost audit. The glow of 6 high-definition monitors illuminates my dark office, casting long shadows across the walls. I do not sleep for the next 48 hours. I survive on bitter black coffee and the pure cold adrenaline of an auditor who has just caught the scent of blood in the water. Trent thought he could hide his financial crimes behind layers of complex corporate jargon and aggressive posturing, but he forgot the golden rule of forensic accounting. Money never actually disappears. It just changes its name and leaves a trail. I start by pulling the public filings and tax disclosures for his investment firm. On the surface, everything looks completely pristine. It is exactly the kind of polished, successful image a senior vice president of finance wants the world to see. But I am not looking at the surface. I deploy custom tracking algorithms I designed specifically for penetrating offshore shell companies and tracing obfuscated assets. I start pulling at the tiny loose threads hidden deep within his quarterly expenditure reports. It takes me 12 hours to break through his first layer of digital armor. Trent is arrogant, but he is not a criminal mastermind. He used a classic shadow ledger technique. He created 3 separate phantom LLCs registered in Delaware and Wyoming to siphon capital away from his clients' commercial real estate portfolios. He authorized massive untraceable payouts to these dummy corporations under the guise of consulting fees, operational research, and administrative overhead. I trace the routing numbers, carefully connecting the dots across dozens of offshore accounts and disguised domestic transfers. As the spreadsheets populate on my screens, the sheer scale of his theft materializes right in front of me. I run the calculations 3 times just to be absolutely certain. My fingers fly across the keyboard, pulling verification from clearinghouses. The math is staggering and completely undeniable. Trent has been systematically embezzling money from his own firm for 3 solid years. The total amount stolen is a catastrophic $4.5 million. I sit back in my ergonomic chair and stare at the flashing red numbers. My brother-in-law is a white-collar criminal staring down the barrel of a decade in federal prison. He is not a financial genius managing generational wealth. He is a desperate thief bleeding out on the balance sheet. But stealing $4.5 million leaves a massive digital footprint. You have to put that money somewhere. I shift my focus from the corporate ledgers to his personal accounts. I initiate a deep dive into the wire transfers originating from those Delaware shell companies. I want to see exactly where Trent parked his stolen millions. The data populates and a bitter, humorless laugh escapes my lips, echoing in the empty office. He did not hide the money in a secure Swiss bank account. He did not invest it in untraceable cryptocurrency or foreign land assets. He spent every single dime on my sister. The wire transfers map out a sickening timeline of Jada's golden child lifestyle. Hundreds of thousands of dollars funneled directly into her extravagant reality to maintain the illusion of black elite supremacy. I see the exact transaction that purchased her imported Porsche. I see the $80,000 wire transfer that funded her month-long luxury shopping excursion through Milan and Paris. I see the recurring monthly deposits that paid for her exorbitant country club memberships, her weekly designer wardrobe updates, and the very destination wedding in Cabo that I had drained my own emergency savings to help rescue. My sister has been living like royalty on stolen funds, flaunting a lifestyle built entirely on federal wire fraud. But the financial trail does not stop with Jada and Trent. The most devastating revelation is still waiting for me, buried in a series of bridging loans and private domestic transfers originating from a local branch. I notice a highly suspicious pattern of large cash infusions moving from Desmond and Vivian's joint accounts directly into Trent's primary holding account. The dates of these transfers coincide perfectly with Trent's corporate audit periods. My parents were quietly transferring hundreds of thousands of dollars to Trent so he could temporarily balance his firm's books and pass his internal audits. The moment the corporate auditors left, Trent would wire the money right back to my parents, with a slight margin added for their trouble. The realization hits me with the force of a physical blow, stealing the breath from my lungs. Desmond and Vivian knew. My mother and father absolutely knew that their son-in-law was embezzling millions. They were actively acting as accessories, aiding and abetting a massive federal crime to protect Jada's pristine social image. They were terrified that if the authorities found out, their golden child would be exposed as the wife of a fraudster. Their prestigious country club status would be revoked, and their affluent lifestyle would be permanently destroyed by association. Everything clicks into place with terrifying absolute clarity. The sudden desperation to seize my grandfather's estate the moment his plane went down. The outright hostility on the front porch. The fake eviction notice. The forged trust documents trying to bind my assets to his liabilities. They never cared about managing the family legacy. They were counting on grandfather Elias's $18 million to quietly replace Trent's stolen $4.5 million before the federal regulators, or the firm's partners, realized the money was gone. My inheritance was their designated bailout fund. I was supposed to be the unwitting sacrificial lamb who signed away my future to save them from federal prison. I compile the massive mountain of digital evidence, organizing the ledgers, the wire transfers, and the dummy corporation filings into a pristine, indisputable dossier. I have the receipts. I have the entire timeline of their criminal conspiracy locked securely on my encrypted drives. They are dead to rights on the math alone. But establishing the flow of money is only half the battle in a court of law. To completely destroy them and secure my grandfather's legacy, I need to establish intent. I need to prove that my grandfather knew exactly what they were doing, and that he explicitly bypassed them to protect his empire from being liquidated by a desperate embezzler. The digital data provides the how and the when, but the why is locked inside a single piece of physical evidence. I lean forward, resting my elbows on the desk, my eyes burning from the screen glare, but my mind razor-sharp. I need the letter Trent snatched from Mr. Harrison's hand at the lawyer's office. That sealed envelope addressed specifically to me holds my grandfather's final testament and the ultimate key to their destruction. Trent stole it because he panicked, knowing it contained the truth. And I know exactly how I am going to get it back. Trent is a creature of immense predictability. Men who build their entire personalities around corporate titles and tailored suits always are. I know his schedule, his habits, and his vulnerabilities. He is a senior vice president of finance, which means he delegates his dirty work. He would never carry stolen legal documents in his own breast pocket any longer than necessary. It is a liability. He would have his assistant arrange for a secure courier to transport the files he gathered at Mr. Harrison's office directly to his downtown corporate suite. He wants that letter locked in his personal safe, hidden away, until he can figure out exactly how to destroy it without leaving a trace. I do not give him the chance. I change out of my office clothes and put on my most intimidating power suit. A sharp, tailored charcoal blazer and a pair of heels that sound like a ticking clock against the pavement. I drive to the financial district and park a block away from his gleaming glass and steel office building. I know the exact high-end logistics company his firm uses for sensitive legal transport. I wait in the lobby of his building, sipping a black coffee, blending in perfectly with the morning rush of executives and corporate lawyers. At precisely 10:15, a young courier walks through the revolving doors, carrying a sealed tamper evident lockbox. I recognize the intake label from Mr. Harrison's law firm instantly. I step directly into the courier's path, cutting him off before he can reach the security desk. I do not ask for the box. I demand it. I flash my heavy gold embossed business card and introduce myself as the primary executor and lead forensic auditor for the Elias estate. I speak in a rapid, aggressive cadence, loaded with dense legal terminology. I drop phrases like chain of custody violations, federal evidence tampering, and immediate subpoena compliance. I tell him the box contains contested estate assets that are currently under a frozen judicial injunction, and if he delivers it to Trent's office, he will be personally named in a federal obstruction lawsuit by the end of the business day. The courier is young, underpaid, and thoroughly intimidated by the barrage of corporate legal threats. He looks at my tailored suit, my unblinking stare, and the forged authorization release form I slide onto his clipboard. He does not want a federal lawsuit. He just wants to finish his route. He hands over the lockbox, takes my signature, and walks out of the building. I do not run. I walk calmly back to my car, place the box on the passenger seat, and lock the doors. My heart beats a steady, controlled rhythm against my ribs. I break the tamper evidence seal and pull open the cardboard flaps. Sitting right on top of a stack of generic trust formation documents is the heavy, cream-colored envelope. The red wax seal is completely intact. Trent was too busy trying to orchestrate my financial ruin to actually open the letter. He arrogantly assumed he had already won the war. I slide my finger under the flap and break the wax seal. I pull out a single sheet of heavy parchment paper covered in my grandfather's bold, steady handwriting. My dear Kendra, the letter begins. If you are reading this, it means I am gone, and the wolves are already circling the estate. I know exactly what your parents and your sister have been saying behind closed doors. I know about Trent. I know everything. I read the next paragraph, and the air leaves my lungs entirely. Do you remember the Sterling account that crossed your desk last October? My grandfather wrote. The anonymous corporate client who hired your independent firm to run a blind stress test on a massive, complex logistical portfolio. That was me, Kendra. I used a proxy corporation to hire you. I needed to see if my quiet, brilliant granddaughter was as sharp and ruthless as I hoped she was. You found discrepancies in my own ledgers that my board of directors missed for a decade. You proved to me that you are the absolute best at what you do. Tears prick the corners of my eyes, but I do not let them fall. My grandfather had been watching me from the shadows. While my parents called me a glorified bookkeeper, the patriarch of the family was secretly testing my mettle, preparing me for the throne. Elias did not mince his words in the final paragraphs. He laid out the brutal, unvarnished truth. He wrote that he had hired a private investigator 6 months ago. He knew Trent was bleeding his own firm dry. He knew about the $4.5 million in embezzled funds. He knew Vivian and Desmond were fully aware of the crime and were actively helping to funnel the stolen money to support Jada's insufferable, lavish lifestyle. Your parents and your sister are not family. Kendra, he wrote, the ink pressing deeply into the paper. They are toxic white-collar criminals masquerading as high society elites. They think they can use my life's work to cover up their felonies. They think they can steal black generational wealth to bail out a white corporate thief. I built this empire with blood, sweat, and absolute integrity. I will not let a parasite dismantle it for parts. I read the final lines, and a profound, chilling sense of purpose settles deep into my bones. I am leaving the entire empire to you, my grandfather concluded. I am leaving it to you because you are the only person in this bloodline with the spine, the intellect, and the sheer ruthlessness required to protect it. Do not negotiate with them. Do not compromise. Drop the hammer on them, Kendra. Make them pay for what they have done. I carefully fold the letter and slip it into my inside jacket pocket, right next to my heart. I do not scream. I do not cry. I do not take a moment to mourn the family I never truly had. The grief is gone, replaced entirely by a cold surgical focus. My grandfather has just given me my final set of marching orders. He handed me the sword, and now it is my turn to swing it. I drive directly back to my secure office. I sit down at my desk and pull up the massive mountain of digital evidence I compiled during my 48-hour deep dive. I hit print. The heavy industrial printer in the corner of my office hums to life, spitting out hundreds of pages of undeniable proof. I organize the documents with meticulous precision. I sort the offshore shell company registrations, the fraudulent wire transfers, the shadow ledgers, and the personal banking statements that implicate my parents as active accessories to federal wire fraud. I highlight the exact routing numbers that prove Trent stole $4.5 million to fund Jada's designer wardrobe and sports cars. I index every single transaction, cross-referencing the dates with the exact moments my parents denied me financial support in college. I take the towering stack of paper and bind it inside a heavy, thick black leather portfolio. I stamp the front cover with the official seal of my forensic auditing firm. It is a pristine, indisputable physical dossier of absolute destruction. There are no loopholes. There is no plausible deniability. The math is perfect, and the evidence is fatal. I place the black portfolio carefully into my briefcase. I pack a single overnight bag with my sharpest clothes. I walk out of my office and lock the door behind me. I walk to my car and program the GPS for the $4 million property in Lake Geneva. I know exactly how my family operates. I know that by taking physical possession of the grandfather's villa, their greed and sheer panic will force them to abandon their cautious legal strategies and confront me directly. I am not hiding from them anymore. I am inviting them into the slaughterhouse. The trap is officially set. Before I leave my secure office, I have one final critical task to execute. Having the physical dossier in my briefcase is my shield, but the digital footprint sitting on my servers is my guided missile. I do not just want Trent to lose a civil lawsuit regarding my grandfather's estate. I want his entire fraudulent existence completely incinerated by the federal government and his corporate overlords. I open a highly encrypted, untraceable email server, one that guarantees delivery receipts and completely prevents the recipient from deleting the contents without leaving a permanent digital scar. I attach the comprehensive digital audit, the shadow ledgers, the offshore routing numbers, and the undeniable proof of the $4.5 million embezzlement. I address the first email to Preston Caldwell, the chief executive officer of Trent's prestigious investment firm. Preston is a man who prides himself on absolute corporate compliance and possesses zero tolerance for public scandal. I carbon copy the firm's general counsel and their entire board of directors, just to ensure Trent cannot intercept the communication and quietly sweep it under the rug. I title the subject line, Notice of Catastrophic Internal Embezzlement and Wire Fraud. I hit send. The second email requires a bit more finesse. I bypass the standard government tip lines and route the package directly to a contact I made during a massive corporate fraud case 2 years ago. Special Agent Mitchell operates within the Internal Revenue Service Criminal Investigation Division. I attach the exact same files, but I add a highly specific summary of the domestic transfers, highlighting Vivian and Desmond's active role in laundering the stolen funds to bypass corporate audits. I detail exactly how my parents temporarily housed the stolen capital to help their son-in-law manipulate his quarterly reviews. I hit send again. The digital bombs are officially airborne. There is no turning back. Trent's career is already dead. He just does not know it yet. I grab my overnight bag and the heavy black leather portfolio. I walk out of my building, slide into my car, and merge onto the highway heading straight toward Lake Geneva. The drive takes just over an hour, but it feels like a victory lap. I watch the dense, chaotic skyline of the city slowly give way to the sprawling, manicured landscapes of the ultra-wealthy suburbs. This is the world my parents so desperately want to belong to. A world built on exclusivity, country club politics, and quiet money. But grandfather Elias did not buy into this zip code to fit in with the local elites. He bought his sprawling estate to prove that a black man from the segregated South could build a logistics empire that eclipsed their generational wealth entirely. He bought it as a fortress for his legacy. And my family was willing to trade that fortress to a white corporate thief just to keep up appearances. My grip on the steering wheel tightens, but my heart rate remains remarkably steady. I know exactly how predators like Trent operate when they are backed into a corner. Right now, Trent believes he holds the absolute upper hand because my father successfully froze my corporate accounts. He thinks I am sitting in my apartment crying over my negative balances, desperately calling lawyers I can no longer afford to pay. He expects me to surrender by Monday morning. But if I take physical possession of the $18 million estate, if I walk right through the front doors of the lake house and claim my throne, his fragile ego will not be able to handle the defiance. His panic will completely override his cautious legal strategy. He will not wait for the courts to sort out the injunction. He will convince Jada, Vivian, and Desmond to march up to Lake Geneva and force me out using pure, brute intimidation. By occupying the house, I am holding a massive neon target over my own head. I am daring them to strike. I pull up to the towering wrought iron gates of the estate. I punch in the master code grandfather Elias gave me years ago. The heavy metal gates swing inward, welcoming the rightful owner home. I drive up the long, winding path, the crushed gravel crunching satisfyingly beneath my tires. I park right in front of the grand marble steps leading up to the main entrance. The house is completely silent, standing tall and majestic against the backdrop of the shimmering, pristine lake. I unlock the massive oak doors and step into the grand foyer. The air is cool and smells faintly of old pine and lemon polish. I set my bag down and place the black leather dossier precisely in the center of the mahogany console table. I pull out my phone and access the estate's smart home security system. I disable the interior motion sensors so I can move freely, but I crank the perimeter driveway alerts to maximum sensitivity. I want to know the exact second they take the bait. I walk into the massive, spotless kitchen and go about the mundane, grounding task of brewing a pot of dark roast coffee. The rich, earthy aroma fills the kitchen, masking the faint scent of a house that has been empty since the funeral. I pour the steaming black liquid into a thick ceramic mug. I do not add cream or sugar. I want the bitter, sharp taste to keep me completely alert and anchored in the present moment. I walk back out to the grand marble foyer. I find a comfortable, high-backed accent chair positioned perfectly near the doorway, offering a clear, unobstructed view of the driveway through the sidelight windows. I sit down, cross my legs, and take a slow, deliberate sip of my coffee. I do not check my phone for incoming emails from the IRS or the investment firm's CEO. I do not pace the floor. I simply sit in the quiet majesty of my grandfather's house and wait for the inevitable. The trap is baited with $18 million of prime real estate, and my family's greed is an absolutely insatiable hunger. They cannot resist it. They will not be able to stop themselves from coming to claim what they believe is theirs by right. I take another sip of coffee. The silence of the morning stretches out thick and heavy with mounting anticipation. Then, exactly on schedule, the silence shatters. My smartphone resting on the console table next to the black dossier lights up. A sharp, piercing chime cuts through the quiet foyer. The notification screen flashes bright red. Perimeter breach detected, main driveway gate accessed. I do not flinch. I stand up slowly, smoothing the wrinkles from my tailored blazer. I pick up my coffee mug and walk toward the heavy oak doors. I look through the narrow glass panes framing the entryway. A convoy of sleek black SUVs is speeding up the long gravel driveway, kicking up a thick cloud of white dust in their wake. The lead vehicle is a leased Mercedes G-Wagon gleaming aggressively under the morning sun. The ambush has arrived. They have come to throw me out of my own home armed with forged papers and hollow threats. And they have absolutely no idea what is waiting for them on the other side of this door. The heavy oak doors are shoved open before they even have a chance to ring the bell. I do not wait for them to knock. I pull the heavy iron handles inward and step right into the threshold. I lean casually against the sturdy wooden doorframe, holding my ceramic mug of black coffee. The morning air is crisp and cool, brushing against my face, but I do not shiver. I stand perfectly still watching the chaotic spectacle unfold on my front lawn. The leased Mercedes comes to a halting stop, kicking up a spray of white gravel. Two more black SUVs pull up right behind it, boxing in my driveway. Trent steps out of the driver's seat first. He is wearing a slim-fit designer suit, waving that forged eviction notice in his hand, like it is a winning lottery ticket. He kicks my leather overnight bag off the porch and into the driveway. He wants to set the tone immediately. He wants to establish physical dominance. But my eyes are drawn to my younger sister. Jada steps out of the passenger side and she is already performing. She is holding her smartphone high in the air, the screen facing her, the red live indicator flashing brightly in the corner. She has a portable ring light clipped to the top of her phone, ensuring her face is perfectly illuminated even in the morning sun. She is broadcasting this entire ambush to her tens of thousands of followers. She flips her freshly styled hair over her shoulder and turns the camera toward herself. Her facial expression shifts in a fraction of a second, from greedy anticipation to absolute heartbreaking devastation. She forces a sob, catching her breath dramatically for her audience. "My sister stole our inheritance, you all," Jada cries, her voice trembling with manufactured grief. She is walking up the stone steps, pointing the camera lens directly at my face. I am standing right here outside my grandfather's house, and she is refusing to let us inside. She manipulated our dying grandfather when his mind was failing. She locked the family out of the hospital room and forced him to sign everything over to her. But justice is being served today. We are taking our family legacy back. I do not flinch. I do not hide my face from the camera or raise my hand to block the lens. I simply stand in the doorway sipping my coffee and letting her record. I look directly into the camera lens with a calm, unbothered expression. I want her followers to see exactly what a woman who owns an $18 million estate looks like. My mind is a steel trap cataloging every single word leaving her glossed lips. She is broadcasting blatant lies to a public audience. She is accusing me of elder abuse, manipulation, and theft on a live platform. Every syllable she speaks is a documented, time-stamped piece of evidence for a massive defamation lawsuit. She is handing me a slam-dunk civil case wrapped in a digital bow. She thinks she is destroying my public image, but she is actually providing the exact video evidence my lawyers will use to strip her of whatever remaining assets she has left after the federal government is done with her husband. Trent steps into the frame, wrapping a protective arm around Jada's shoulders. He plays the role of the righteous defender perfectly. He looks into the camera, his jaw set in a hard line. "We are not letting financial predators destroy this family," he announces, using his polished corporate voice. "We have the official legal documentation right here. We are executing a lawful eviction to remove a hostile squatter from the premises." He shoves the forged eviction notice toward my face, waving it aggressively. "Your squatting days are over, Kendra," he barks, dropping the polite tone now that he has addressed the internet. "You have exactly 5 minutes to gather your trash and vacate this property." I take another slow, deliberate sip of my dark roast coffee. The bitter liquid warms my throat. I look at the piece of paper he is waving. "Did your compliance department draft that document, Trent?" I ask, my voice smooth and utterly devoid of panic. "Or did you just print a free template off a legal website and forge a county clerk's signature?" Because submitting fraudulent eviction documents while being filmed live on social media is a remarkably poor strategic decision for a senior vice president of finance. Trent's smug expression falters for just a heartbeat. His eyes dart nervously toward the camera phone, then back to me. He lowers the paper slightly, his grip tightening. "You do not know what you are talking about." He spits, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper, meant only for me. "You are completely out of your depth." Before I can respond to his hollow threat, the rear doors of the Mercedes swing open. My parents step out onto the gravel. Desmond and Vivian march up the steps, flanking Trent and Jada like an imposing royal guard. Desmond squares his broad shoulders, looking at the phone camera with the solemn, stoic expression of a deeply betrayed patriarch. He is completely on board with Jada's social media spectacle, believing that public pressure will force me to fold. But Vivian cannot maintain the grieving mother act. The moment she reaches the top step, her polished country club facade shatters entirely. She hates that I am not crying. She hates that I am not begging for their forgiveness or shrinking away from the camera. She hates that I am looking down at them from the threshold of a multi-million-dollar estate that she believes rightfully belongs to her. Vivian steps right past Trent and Jada, invading my personal space. She stops mere inches from my face. The sharp scent of her expensive floral perfume mixes with the crisp morning air from the lake. She glares at me, her eyes burning with a furious, toxic resentment that has been brewing for 35 years. She does not care about the camera anymore. She only cares about breaking me. "You have disgraced our bloodline, Kendra," she hisses, her voice shaking with pure, unadulterated venom. "You have humiliated this family for the absolute last time. You are a spiteful, jealous mistake of a daughter, and I will not let you steal what belongs to my real children." I do not break eye contact. I do not step back into the foyer. I stand my ground, letting her furious energy crash against my absolute calm. "You think you are so smart?" Vivian continues, her voice dropping into a vicious low register. "You think you can just lock the doors and keep us out? You have exactly 5 minutes to walk down that driveway with nothing but the clothes on your back. If you are not off this property, when that timer runs out, Trent's private security team is going to drag you off this porch by your hair and throw you directly into the freezing lake." She gestures sharply toward the two black SUVs parked behind their Mercedes. The heavy doors of the trailing vehicles open simultaneously. 4 massive men step out onto the gravel. They are wearing tactical gear and dark sunglasses, completely ignoring the cameras. They crack their knuckles and adjust their posture, making it abundantly clear that they are not here to negotiate. They are highly paid muscle brought here specifically to physically assault me and forcibly remove me from the estate. I look past my mother's shoulder at the 4 men advancing slowly up the driveway. They are imposing figures designed to strike absolute terror into anyone standing in their path. Trent hired them to do his dirty work, ensuring his own hands remained clean, while his wife filmed the aftermath for her adoring online audience. They have orchestrated a modern-day public lynching of my character and my physical safety. They expect me to drop my coffee mug, fall to my knees, and surrender the keys to a logistics empire just to avoid being brutally assaulted on my own front lawn. Jada is still narrating to her livestream, her voice dripping with fake sympathy for her own plight. She tells her viewers that she hopes I seek the psychological help I desperately need once I am removed from the premises. She is actively painting me as a deranged criminal who needs to be handled with force for the safety of the family. The sheer level of their coordinated delusion is almost impressive. They have convinced themselves that because they possess social status and wealth, they are entirely above the law. My father Desmond finally speaks up, his voice booming with forced authority. "Do not make us do this the hard way, Kendra. Hand over the keys and the alarm codes. Trent has a legal right to secure this asset. If you walk away quietly right now, we will not press criminal charges for your trespassing. We will let you go back to your little apartment and your little accounting firm, and we will pretend this ugly incident never happened." He is offering me a false lifeline, a poisoned branch disguised as mercy. He expects me to snatch it up out of pure survival instinct. He expects the threat of physical violence from the 4 advancing security guards to be the catalyst that finally breaks my spirit. I take one final long sip of my coffee. The liquid is starting to go cold, but it still tastes incredibly sweet. I lower the mug and look at the faces of my family. I see greed. I see arrogance. I see an absolute, unshakable certainty that they have won the war. They are entirely unaware that the timer they just set is not ticking down to my destruction. It is ticking down to theirs. I do not need 5 minutes. I only need 1. Trent pushes his way past my mother, eager to reclaim the spotlight, now that the threat of physical violence has been established. He squares his shoulders, puffing out his chest beneath his expensive cashmere sweater. He steps so close to me that I can smell the sharp metallic scent of his overpriced cologne, mixed with the sour undertone of his own nervous sweat. He uses his height trying to physically loom over me, a classic intimidation tactic he likely perfected in downtown boardrooms when trying to bully junior partners into submission. You really think you can play in the big leagues? Kendra Trent sneers, his voice dripping with absolute contempt. He points a finger directly at my face, entirely dropping the polished, polite son-in-law act he usually wears for the country club crowd. You are a small-time independent auditor. You run a boutique agency that balances books for local mom-and-pop shops. My firm retains a legal department that bills thousands of dollars an hour. By Monday morning, I am going to unleash a swarm of corporate litigators on your little accounting hobby. We will file so many injunctions, cease and desist orders, and defamation suits that your business will be buried before you even finish your morning coffee. You will not be able to afford a public defender, let alone fight a drawn-out legal battle over an $18 million estate. He leans in closer, his voice dropping to a harsh, aggressive pitch. You are completely outmatched. Hand over the keys right now, or I swear I will make sure your professional reputation is so thoroughly destroyed that you will never work in the financial sector again. I do not step back. I do not blink. I look at his pointed finger, then I look directly into his eyes. I see the exact moment he realizes his intimidation tactics are bouncing off me like rain against a concrete wall. He expects me to be terrified by the threat of corporate lawyers and financial ruin. He expects me to cower because he is a white man with a senior vice president title throwing his weight around. But Trent is completely irrelevant to me. He is just a symptom of the actual disease infecting my family. I slowly shift my gaze away from Trent, completely dismissing him. I look right past his puffed-out chest and lock eyes with my father. Desmond is standing on the top step of the porch, looking incredibly pleased with Trent's aggressive performance. My father loves power, and right now he believes Trent holds all of it. Desmond expects me to finally bow my head and surrender to the family hierarchy. He expects me to accept my place at the absolute bottom of the ladder. I take a slow, deliberate breath, ensuring my voice carries clearly across the morning air, loud enough for the advancing security guards to hear, loud enough for Jada's live stream to capture every single syllable. Are you really willing to let a white man who stole $4.5 million dictate the legacy of a black empire built from the ground up? I ask, my voice ringing out with absolute, undeniable authority. The entire porch freezes. The words hit the air like a physical shockwave. Jada actually lowers her smartphone, the live stream completely forgotten, as her mouth drops open in sheer shock. The four massive security guards advancing up the driveway hesitate, their heavy boots crunching to a halt on the gravel. They were hired to remove a hostile squatter, not step into the middle of a massive federal fraud confrontation. I keep my eyes entirely locked on my father. I watch the smug, confident expression melt right off Desmond's face. The color drains completely from his cheeks, leaving him looking pale, sickly, and suddenly very old. His jaw slackens, and he takes a shaky, involuntary step backward, his polished leather shoes slipping slightly against the stone porch. Vivian gasps, her hand flying up to clutch her pearl necklace so tightly I can hear the silk string straining. Her eyes are wide with absolute, unadulterated terror. They know. In that single, devastating sentence, my parents realize that their carefully constructed house of cards has just been obliterated. They realize that I did not just inherit a house, I inherited the truth. Grandpa Elias did not scrub warehouse floors, fight off systemic redlining, and work 18-hour days in the segregated South just so you could hand his blood, sweat, and tears over to a corporate thief. I continue stepping forward, forcing my father to look at me. He built this logistics empire with relentless integrity. He built generational wealth so his family would never have to bow to anyone. And you were going to quietly liquidate his life's work just to bail out a criminal who was bleeding his own firm dry to buy your golden child designer handbags. Desmond opens his mouth to speak, but no words come out. He is completely paralyzed by the exposure. He thought he had outsmarted me by freezing my bank accounts, completely unaware that I had spent the last 48 hours tearing through Trent's shadow ledgers and offshore dummy corporations. He realizes that I have the receipts, the wire transfers, and the exact timeline of their complicity. I turn my attention back to Trent. The corporate bravado has vanished entirely from his face. He looks like a man who has just stepped on a landmine and heard the internal mechanism click. His breathing is shallow and rapid. The panic radiating from him is thick enough to choke on. "You shut your mouth!" Trent shouts, his voice cracking with pure desperation. He looks wildly at Jada, whose phone is still recording, then back at my parents, silently begging them to intervene and shut me down. She is lying. She is insane. Do not listen to a word she says. She is just trying to manipulate the situation because she knows she has lost. But nobody is defending him. Desmond is staring at the ground, utterly defeated. Vivian is shaking her pristine country club facade, destroyed by the undeniable reality that her daughter knows she is an accessory to federal wire fraud. Trent realizes he has lost the psychological war. He realizes that words are no longer going to save him, and the only option he has left is brute physical force. He needs me off this property immediately before I can say anything else on camera, before I can expose any more of the criminal enterprise he dragged my family into. His face contorts into a mask of ugly, violent rage. He turns aggressively toward the driveway, raising his hand high in the air. He snaps his fingers sharply, signaling the 4 bulky security guards waiting by the SUVs. "Get her out of here," Trent commands, his voice raw and frantic. "Remove her from the premises right now. I do not care how you do it, just get her off this porch." The security guards exchange a quick, uncertain glance, clearly uncomfortable with the escalating situation, but they are being paid handsomely to follow orders. They adjust their tactical vests and begin marching heavily up the stone steps, closing the distance between us. Their massive frames block out the morning sun, casting long, dark shadows across the marble threshold of my grandfather's house. Trent turns back to me, a desperate, vicious sneer returning to his pale face. He thinks physical violence is the ultimate trump card. He thinks that if he can just throw me into the gravel and lock the heavy oak doors behind him, he can figure out a way to spin the narrative and salvage his stolen millions. "Your time is up, Kendra," Trent says, stepping safely behind the wall of approaching muscle. "You are done." I do not step back into the foyer. I do not reach for the heavy oak doors to lock myself inside. I stand perfectly still on the marble threshold, watching the guards ascend the final steps, watching Trent hide behind them like the coward he truly is. I take one last steadying breath, my heart rate calm, my mind entirely focused. Trent thinks the countdown has reached 0. He thinks he has just played his final winning move. He has absolutely no idea that I am not the one who needs to be worried about time running out. The 4 security contractors close the distance methodically. Their heavy tactical boots scrape against the marble steps of my grandfather's house, creating a harsh grinding sound that echoes across the quiet lakefront. They move with the synchronized confidence of men who are accustomed to being obeyed without question. I do not retreat into the safety of the foyer. I do not reach for the heavy oak doors to barricade myself inside. I simply reach into the tailored pocket of my charcoal blazer and retrieve my smartphone. The high-definition screen is already glowing brightly in the morning sun. I have had a highly specific number queued up on speed dial since the exact moment the perimeter alarms triggered my security system. I press the bright green call button. The connection is absolutely instantaneous. The person on the other end of the line does not say a single word of greeting, and neither do I. I look right past the advancing wall of hired muscle. I lock my eyes directly onto Trent, and I speak into the receiver with a voice that cuts through the tense morning air with absolute chilling precision. "They are here. Bring them in." I tap the screen to end the call and slip the device seamlessly back into my pocket. The execution of the movement is completely flawless, displaying 0 hesitation. Jada bursts into a loud, theatrical laugh that shatters the brief silence. She steps out from behind her husband and points her smartphone camera directly at my face, ensuring her live stream audience captures every single second of what she firmly believes is my pathetic final act of desperation. She flips her freshly pressed hair over her shoulder and leans into her device microphone. "You all see this, right?" She mocks, her voice dripping with venomous delight. My sister is completely delusional. She is standing on the porch, pretending to call the police like some sort of cornered animal playing pretend. She is actually trying to fake a rescue call because she knows she has absolutely nothing left. She knows she has lost, and now she is just embarrassing herself for the internet. Jada turns the camera lens toward Trent, who is slowly regaining his arrogant corporate smirk. Trent steps out from behind his wall of security guards, completely emboldened by his wife's public mockery. "You really think a fake phone call is going to save you, Kendra?" he taunts, crossing his arms over his cashmere sweater. "You think I am stupid enough to execute a property seizure without handling the local authorities first? I am a senior vice president of finance. I do not leave loose ends. I had my legal team contact the county sheriff hours ago. We provided them with the trust documents and informed them that this is a private family dispute over estate management. They assured my lawyers they are not sending a single squad car up this mountain to interfere. You are completely isolated out here. There is no cavalry coming to rescue you." My mother Vivian visibly relaxes at Trent's confident reassurance. She adjusts her posture, smoothing the wrinkles from her designer dress, fully ready to watch me get physically dragged off my own property. My father Desmond shakes his head, looking at me with a mixture of deep pity and severe irritation. He actually believes I am bluffing. He believes I am just a frightened accountant trying to buy a few extra seconds of dignity before the inevitable humiliation of being tossed into the gravel. They all believe that their carefully constructed world of wealth and privilege makes them untouchable. The lead security guard, a massive man with a thick neck and dark sunglasses, steps onto the top landing of the porch. His shadow falls heavily over me. He reaches out a large gloved hand toward my shoulder, intending to grab my blazer and physically force me out of the doorway. I do not flinch. I do not brace my body for the physical impact. I simply look down at his reaching hand and then look him dead in the eyes. I would strongly advise against making physical contact. I state my voice perfectly level and entirely devoid of fear. If you touch me right now, you will not be facing a simple civil trespassing dispute in a local county court. You will be facing federal assault charges, and I guarantee the man who hired you does not have the liquid capital to post your bail. The guard hesitates. My absolute lack of fear severely confuses him. He has been trained to handle panic tears and physical resistance. He does not know how to process cold, calculated authority from a black woman standing alone against 4 armed men. He looks back at Trent for confirmation, his hand hovering awkwardly in the space between us. Trent waves his hand angrily, his face flushing red with sudden irritation. He barks at the guards to stop stalling and grab me immediately so they can secure the property. Before the guard can follow the aggressive order, a low mechanical rumble echoes from the bottom of the long, winding driveway. It is a heavy, synchronized sound that vibrates through the thick morning air. Everyone on the porch freezes instantly. Jada stops talking to her live stream, her mouth hanging slightly open. Trent turns his head sharply toward the property entrance, his brow furrowing in deep confusion. Desmond and Vivian exchange a sudden anxious glance, their pristine country club composure cracking at the edges. The massive wrought iron gates at the perimeter of the estate, the ones Trent confidently assumed he had successfully bypassed, are moving. They do not just open slowly, they swing inward with violent urgency. The loud metallic groan of the heavy hinges alerts every single person on the property that something massive and unstoppable is approaching. Trent squints against the bright morning sun peering down the tree-lined driveway. He expects to see a stray delivery truck or perhaps a lost neighbor wandering onto the estate. He certainly does not expect what comes tearing around the bend of the crushed gravel path. It is not the flashing red and blue lights of the local county sheriff. It is not the polite neighborhood patrol that Trent supposedly paid off or handled with his expensive corporate lawyers. 3 heavy, unmarked, black government utility vehicles speed up the driveway, moving in a tight, synchronized tactical formation. They are not driving with the casual pace of suburban law enforcement responding to a noise complaint. They are driving with the aggressive, targeted speed of a federal raid executing a high-priority warrant. The heavy tires crush the gravel brutally as they accelerate toward the front of the house. Trent's private security guards immediately step back from me, their hands instinctively dropping away from their tactical belts. They recognize the movement patterns of government vehicles. They know instantly that they are severely outmatched and currently sitting on the wrong side of a very serious operation. These men are paid to intimidate unarmed civilians, not to engage in a standoff with federal agents. The three black vehicles do not park politely on the shoulder of the driveway. They swerve aggressively, cutting sharp, precise angles across the pristine lawn and the circular turnaround. The lead vehicle slams on its brakes directly in front of the porch, perfectly boxing in Trent's leased Mercedes. The other two vehicles fan out and completely blockade the security SUVs, preventing any possible route of vehicular escape. A thick cloud of white dust washes over the driveway, settling on the expensive cars and the designer shoes of my terrified family. The engines of the black vehicles cut off simultaneously. The silence that follows is deafening, replacing the chaotic shouting of my sister and the arrogant threats of my brother-in-law. The true power dynamic of the day has finally arrived. The heavy reinforced doors of the three black vehicles pop open in unison. A dozen men and women step out onto the crushed gravel. They are not local deputies responding to a noise complaint. They are wearing navy blue windbreakers with stark yellow lettering printed aggressively across their backs. IRS Criminal Investigation Division. The private security contractors Trent hired take one look at those federal windbreakers and immediately raise their hands, empty and visible. They step backward in complete surrender, wanting absolutely zero part in a federal raid. They dissolve into the background, leaving my family entirely exposed on the front lawn. Jada forgets she is holding her smartphone. Her arm drops to her side, but the camera lens is still pointed upward, continuing to broadcast the absolute destruction of her perfect life to thousands of viewers in real time. Two figures emerge from the lead vehicle and begin walking methodically up the marble steps toward my porch. I recognize the first man immediately. Special Agent Mitchell is a tall, no-nonsense federal investigator with a posture that radiates authority. But the man walking directly beside him is what makes Trent stop breathing entirely. He is a distinguished, older white man, wearing an immaculate bespoke charcoal suit. He is Preston Caldwell, the chief executive officer of the very investment firm where Trent currently serves as a senior vice president. Preston does not look at the Grand Lake house. He looks directly at Trent, with the cold, detached disgust, usually reserved for scraping something vile off the bottom of an expensive shoe. Trent opens his mouth, attempting to form a coherent sentence. He tries to call Preston by his first name, trying desperately to deploy that polished corporate charm he uses to manipulate wealthy clients. But his voice catches in his throat, producing nothing but a pathetic, breathless wheeze. His corporate armor has completely evaporated. He is just a cornered thief staring at the men who have come to lock him in a cage. I step forward, crossing the marble threshold of my grandfather's house. I am holding the heavy black leather portfolio in my left hand. I look directly into Trent's horrified, bloodless face. I allow a slow, razor-sharp smile to curve my lips. You did not honestly think a forensic accountant would just sign a blind trust without running an intensive audit on you. First, did you? Trent staggers back a half step. His knees actually buckle slightly as the absolute gravity of his miscalculation crashes down on him. He realizes in real time that I did not just refuse to hand over my $18 million inheritance. I completely dismantled his entire financial existence. He thought he was hunting a helpless, naive target, but he had willingly walked headfirst into an activated trap. Special Agent Mitchell steps onto the top landing and flashes his federal badge. He introduces himself, clearly confirming that he is executing a federal warrant for wire fraud and embezzlement. I step toward the federal agent and hold out the heavy black portfolio stamped with my firm's official seal. Agent Mitchell. I state, my voice projecting clearly, so every single person on the porch hears me. Inside this physical dossier, you will find the complete digital footprint, the shadow ledgers, and the offshore routing numbers, confirming the systematic embezzlement of $4.5 million from Mr. Caldwell's investment firm. You will also find the domestic wire transfers, detailing exactly how that stolen capital was temporarily laundered through domestic accounts before funding a luxury lifestyle. Agent Mitchell takes the heavy portfolio from my hands. He nods sharply, acknowledging the meticulously compiled evidence. Preston Caldwell steps forward, his eyes locked entirely on Trent. Preston informs his now former senior vice president that he is officially terminated effective immediately. He tells Trent that the firm's assets are frozen and the board of directors will pursue him to the absolute fullest extent of federal law to recover every single stolen dime. Panic raw and primal completely overtakes Trent. The polished executive vanishes, leaving only a desperate criminal operating on pure animal instinct. He looks back at his leased Mercedes and sees the federal vehicles blocking it completely. He looks at the iron gates at the bottom of the driveway and knows they are securely locked. His life is officially over, and the reality shatters his mind. Trent makes a desperate, pathetic, split-second decision. He turns sharply and sprints toward the side of the house, scrambling frantically for the manicured lawn leading down to the lake. He thinks he can run. He thinks he can somehow escape a coordinated federal operation on foot. He does not make it 3 steps. One of the federal agents flanking Mitchell lunges forward with terrifying speed. The agent seizes Trent violently by the collar of his expensive cashmere sweater. The sheer force of the grab yanks Trent backward so hard his expensive loafers fly completely out from under him. He hits the crushed gravel with a loud, painful thud, the air rushing out of his lungs in a sharp gasp. The federal agent hauls Trent up from the crushed stone with absolute ruthless efficiency. The pristine cashmere sweater Trent wore to intimidate me is now torn and coated in white gravel dust. The agent shoves him forward, pressing him face first against the polished hood of his own leased Mercedes. The sharp, unmistakable sound of steel handcuffs ratcheting shut rings out across the lakefront property, a mechanical snap that permanently ends his reign of corporate arrogance. Agent Mitchell stands directly behind him, reading him his rights, in a steady, booming voice that cites federal wire fraud, massive corporate embezzlement, and the systematic theft of $4.5 million. Trent is weeping now. The powerful senior vice president has dissolved into a pathetic, sobbing mess, begging Preston Caldwell to listen to him, promising he can put the money back. The CEO simply turns his back in sheer disgust, refusing to even acknowledge the criminal who polluted his firm. Jada lets out a blood-curdling shriek that tears through the morning air. The reality of her vanishing social status hits her all at once, violently shattering the illusion of her perfect life. Her hands tremble so uncontrollably that she drops her smartphone. It hits the stone porch with a sharp, loud crack, but the screen does not go dark. The device lands perfectly propped against the bottom step, the camera lens angled upward, capturing a flawless wide shot of her husband being manhandled by federal authorities. The red live indicator continues to flash brightly. Thousands of her adoring followers are actively watching the absolute destruction of her carefully curated reality. The comments section must be scrolling at light speed, documenting the exact moment the affluent golden child loses her stolen empire on a public broadcast. She scrambles down the steps, screaming at the agents to let her husband go, but a female officer firmly blocks her path, warning her to step back or face obstruction charges. Jada falls to her knees on the driveway, her designer trench coat dragging in the dirt, wailing as she watches the agents empty Trent's pockets and confiscate his phone. My parents, Desmond and Vivian, finally break out of their paralyzed state. Pure survival instinct overrides any remaining familial loyalty. They instantly turn on the man they were just championing minutes ago. Desmond waves his hands frantically, loudly declaring that Trent acted entirely alone, that he is a master manipulator who deceived the entire family. My father points a shaking finger at his son-in-law, telling the federal agents that they had absolutely no knowledge of the missing corporate funds and that they were simply innocent bystanders caught in the crossfire of his deceit. Vivian joins in immediately, her voice shrill with panic. She cries out that they are respected members of the community, prominent figures at the country club, and victims of a terrible misunderstanding. They throw Trent under the bus without a single second of hesitation, perfectly willing to watch him burn if it means saving their own affluent lifestyle. Special Agent Mitchell is completely unmoved by their theatrical performance. He gestures to another agent who steps directly into Desmond's path, cutting off his frantic pacing. Agent Mitchell pulls a secondary folder from his navy blue windbreaker. He calmly and coldly informs my parents that the federal government does not consider them to be victims in this conspiracy. Mitchell states that the digital trail provided to his office explicitly shows hundreds of thousands of dollars moving through their joint banking accounts. He reads off the exact dates of the domestic wire transfers, matching them perfectly with Trent's corporate audit periods. He tells them they actively facilitated the laundering of stolen corporate assets to help bypass internal financial regulations. The color drains completely from Desmond's face as he realizes the dossier I handed over did not just target Trent, it targeted the entire criminal operation. Mitchell formally informs my parents that they are officially being detained for questioning regarding their active role as accessories to federal financial crimes and the use of offshore shell companies to hide stolen capital. Vivian gasps, her hand flying to her chest, as if she has been physically struck. The federal agents step forward immediately, separating her from my father. They instruct my parents to place their hands behind their backs. The metallic click of handcuffs echoes twice more across the driveway, securing both Desmond and Vivian. The Miranda rights are read aloud once again, a steady rhythmic drone that seals the fate of the people who tried to destroy my future. The security contractors Trent hired are already getting into their vehicles and speeding down the driveway, completely abandoning the sinking ship. The agents begin guiding my handcuffed parents and brother-in-law down the marble steps toward the waiting black government utility vehicles. As they are marched away from the grand estate, Vivian twists her head around, fighting against the agent guiding her by the arm. She looks back at me, standing completely untouched on the pristine marble threshold. The arrogance, the toxic resentment, and the country club superiority are entirely gone from her face. They have been replaced by naked, desperate terror. She cries out my name, her voice breaking into a pathetic, ragged sob. She begs me to call my lawyers, pleading with me to explain to the agents that this is all a massive mistake. She demands that I save them, relying on that old ingrained expectation that I will always sacrifice myself to fix the family messes. I stand in the doorway holding my ceramic mug. I look at the woman who told me I disgraced our bloodline just 10 minutes ago. I look at the father who threatened to bankrupt me. I look at the sister kneeling in the dirt, weeping over a shattered phone. I do not say a single word. I do not offer a shred of comfort or a promise of legal rescue. I simply step back into the grand foyer of my grandfather's house, reach for the heavy oak doors and pull them firmly shut, the heavy brass latch clicking securely into place right in her face. That sharp metallic click was the exact sound of a toxic bloodline being permanently severed. 6 months have passed since that morning on the porch. The dust kicked up by those black government vehicles has long since settled, and the landscape of my family has been entirely reshaped by the brutal, unforgiving hand of justice. Trent did not even try to mount a defense. My digital dossier was so comprehensive, so meticulously cross-referenced with offshore routing numbers and shadow ledgers that his high-priced corporate defense attorneys advised him to surrender immediately. Facing a potential 20-year sentence and a spectacular public trial, his arrogance finally crumbled. He accepted a federal plea deal. He is currently serving a mandatory 10-year sentence in a medium-security federal correctional institution. There are no cashmere sweaters or corner offices where he is going. His prestigious finance career was instantly vaporized, replaced by a gray jumpsuit and a concrete cell. Jada suffered a downfall that was arguably more painful for her than prison. When the IRS Criminal Investigation Division finished freezing Trent's assets, they came directly for the lifestyle built on his stolen millions. The federal authorities seized absolutely everything. The imported Porsche she loved to flaunt was towed out of her driveway by government contractors. Agents boxed up her designer handbags, her custom jewelry, and her extravagant wardrobe to be auctioned off to pay restitution to the investment firm. She was forced to declare complete bankruptcy. The social media followers she tried to weaponize against me abandoned her overnight, treating her live-streamed humiliation as a cautionary tale of extreme greed. Completely exiled from the affluent black elite circles she used to rule, Jada was forced to face the harsh reality of her own severe incompetence. Having never developed a single marketable skill, my former golden child sister is currently working a minimum wage retail job at an outdoor shopping outlet. She spends her days folding the exact same luxury garments she used to purchase with stolen money, forced to serve the very same wealthy socialites she used to consider her peers. My parents managed to narrowly avoid federal prison time, but the cost of their freedom was their entire existence. The federal prosecutors offered them a deal in exchange for their full cooperation in dismantling Trent's offshore laundering network. But the IRS showed absolutely zero mercy regarding the financial penalties. Between the massive government fines for tax evasion, the restitution demands, and the exorbitant legal fees required to keep them out of a federal penitentiary, Desmond and Vivian were bled completely dry. The fallout within their social circle was immediate and absolute. The prestigious country club revoked their membership within 24 hours of the arrest. My mother's elite sorority alumni chapter quietly removed her from their executive board, erasing her name from their charity gala invitations. The wealthy friends they spent decades cultivating dropped them without a second thought, treating their presence like a contagious financial disease. They were forced to sell their sprawling suburban home at a massive loss just to cover their legal debts. Today, Desmond and Vivian live in a cramped, outdated two-bedroom apartment on the other side of the city. There are no more leased Mercedes SUVs or crystal champagne flutes. Their days of holding court over catered networking dinners are permanently replaced by the crushing, inescapable reality of living on a strict, restricted budget. They sacrificed their only loyal daughter to protect a mirage, and in the end the mirage evaporated, leaving them with absolutely nothing. I do not check on them, I do not send them money, I do not answer the occasional desperate letters my mother sends to my office. The boundary I set on my front porch is absolute and impenetrable. I cut the infection out of my life, and I refuse to let it fester again. I am sitting on the expansive wooden deck of my grandfather's lake house. The crisp evening air rolls off Lake Geneva, carrying the fresh scent of pine and deep water. The setting sun paints the sky in brilliant strokes of crushed violet and burnt orange, casting a warm golden reflection across the surface of the lake. My laptop is open on the patio table in front of me. I am currently reviewing the third quarter financial reports for Elias Logistics Incorporated. The numbers scrolling across my screen are not just healthy, they are completely booming. Without Trent's greedy hands trying to dismantle the fleet, and without my parents attempting to siphon funds to maintain their false prestige, the company is operating at peak efficiency. I recently authorized the acquisition of a new regional distribution hub, expanding our commercial footprint across 3 state lines. My own forensic auditing firm has also doubled in size, securing massive new corporate contracts from executives who saw exactly how ruthlessly I dismantled my own corrupt family. They know that an auditor who will hand her own parents over to the federal government cannot be bought, intimidated, or compromised. I lean back in my comfortable teak deck chair and reach for the crystal glass resting beside my laptop. The deep red Cabernet swirls smoothly against the glass, catching the last fading rays of the evening sun. I look out over the sprawling, quiet majesty of the $4 million estate that stands as a fortress of black generational wealth. I did not just survive my family's treachery. I did not just endure their coordinated sabotage or cower when they brought armed men to my doorstep. I weaponized their own unhinged greed against them and used it to completely clean house. I extracted the parasites who were feeding on my grandfather's life work, ensuring that his legacy will continue to grow and thrive for decades to come. I raise my glass of red wine high into the twilight sky, offering a silent, triumphant toast to the man who saw my potential when everyone else looked right past me. I did not just inherit an empire, Grandpa Elias. I protected our legacy. The most profound lesson from this story is that biological ties never excuse toxic behavior, and family loyalty should never require your self-destruction. True empowerment comes from knowing your absolute worth and refusing to shrink yourself to protect someone else's fragile ego. When faced with manipulation, your strongest armor is the undeniable truth and unshakable boundaries. You do not have to be the sacrificial lamb for a dysfunctional family system. Protecting your peace and your rightful legacy sometimes means stepping out of the shadows, presenting the cold, hard facts, and letting the consequences fall exactly where they belong. If you've ever had to draw a hard line to protect your peace and self-worth from toxic relatives, share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to hit like and subscribe for more empowering journeys.